All praises to Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shai Bahashem, Harakah Kwadash, double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and salutes to all the sincere elect out there. Aria, back at you with another lesson. Lord willing, be a quick one. Lord willing, be edifying. And we're in the time of Jacob's trouble, apostates, sellouts, and agents. So here's some more news, as we know. A house divided against itself cannot stand, and we're going to see more fragmentation or division in this Senate over there in Babylon, because that's how countries, that's how kingdoms, that's how militaries, that's how wars, they fragment, and in this case it's fragmented from the inside out. So who is Joe Kent? And why did he resign as Trump's terrorism chief? We're going to get into some of this couple of videos we got, Lord willing, just to hit the points. Let's get into some of this here.
It's a good thing that he's out.
President Trump slammed former Green Beret Joe Kent minutes after Kent posted his letter of resignation on social media, saying he, quote, cannot in good conscience support the ongoing war in Iran. Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation.
I read his statement. I always thought he was a nice guy, but I always thought he was weak on security, very weak on security.
That's not what Trump said last year when he nominated Kent to run the National Counterterrorism Center. Then he praised Kent as a man who, quote, hunted down terrorists and criminals his entire adult life.
The threat posed by terrorists of all brands remains very high right now.
Kent's nomination was controversial. He had a history of embracing conspiracy theories. In his resignation letter yesterday, Kent wrote, quote, it is clear that we started this war due to pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby. The White House press secretary called that absurd and insulting. Other critics called it anti-Semitic. Trump himself didn't dwell on Kent yesterday.
I think NATO's making a very foolish mistake.
He was angrier at NATO allies who continue to reject his request for military assistance to escort oil tankers through the Strait of Hormuz.
We don't need too much help, and we don't need any help, actually. This was a great test, because we don't need them, but they should have been there.
Even as his war with Iran rages on, Trump may have already set his sights on another country much closer to home. Yesterday, he said, quote, we'll be doing something in Cuba very soon. One day after he said he thinks he can do whatever he wants with that island nation. In response, Cuba's president posted on X warning that any external aggressor will clash with a, quote, impregnable resistance.
So, you got war going across the water, right? So-called Middle East, right? You got war with all the nations near enough, as the video I did yesterday, right? Over 10, going up in 20, right? And that goes into more prophecy, Revelation 17, right? The beast, right, is turning on the whore. And you got war in your own Senate now, war in your own office, right? A former Green Beret Marine as turning against you. And I think there's a word for that. But let me hit the precept. I think there's a word for that. But let's hit Matthew 12 and 25. It says, and Jesus, so, you know, for you Christians, you call him just Jesus, yeah? And Yahushua knew their thoughts and said unto them, every kingdom divided against itself is brought to desolation, and every city or house divided against itself shall not stand. He's cut. He's cut. When you got divisions against your own household, and you're calling to other nations for help, right? Claiming you don't need them, but you do need them, right? In your own Senate, you got war, division, right? Axes to grind. People. As a matter of fact, I'm going to check out the word. There's a word for that. There's a particular word for that. What is a defector? A defector, yep. All right, so what is a defector? According to Google, a defector is a person who abandons their country, cause, or political party, usually to join on an opposing or rival group. There's a word for that, of defector or traitor, right? he's now an enemy, and that's the beast hating the whore. And also Daniel's chapters 2, the molten clay, the nations, or the in-house, the in-house rivalry, the molten clay and the iron that ain't mixing, right? NATO and the EU defecting. You've got an individual defector here, or another word for that is rebel, right? But he's a rebel with a cause, not without a cause, right? A person who abandons their country, course, or political party, usually to join an opposing or rival group. It implies as often the illegitimate switch of alliances, such as a citizen fleeing a totalitarian state for another nation, right? There's another word for that, and I'm pretty sure he feels betrayed as much as Donald Trump is putting on a brave face. The military is committed, but defectors say that the rebels are fighting back. Anyway, I got some other words here because we're going to get back to them. Watch a couple of more of them TikTok videos because this is prophecy, right? So I just tapped this in Google in way of getting to the, what is a house divided against itself? A house divided cannot stand. I just tapped that in. I was looking for the scripture, but it's giving me more than just the scripture. It says, a house divided cannot stand. It is a proverb highlighting that internal conflict and disunity cause the downfall of groups, families, or nations. Yep, and that's what Yehoshua said that. It's in red letters. Right, we're going to hit the scripture too. Originating from the Bible, it emphasizes that a group must remain united to survive and succeed, often used as a plea for unity in political organization or personal relationships. Right, and we've got another example there. Yep, it can't work. Can two walk together unless they agree? So you got defectors in your own Senate, right? And that's just the beginning. What did Abraham Lincoln say? Abraham Lincoln famously used this in 1858 to describe the unsustainable divide over slavery. Right, so there's a future video there, right, into some history, because there was a divide. It wasn't because they were so peace loving and they loved the slaves. There was a war over the slaves, right? In history, where they called it a civil war over who's going to own the slaves, right? And that's what Abraham Lincoln was referring to. Describes the unsustainable divide over slavery in the United States, warning that the country would not fall but become all one thing or all the other, according to Wikipedia. Abraham Lincoln, right? So there was a divide. There was a civil war over who's going to own the slaves when you get into the history. But there's some points I'm just making there, right? Frictions. People got axes to grind. People are not happy in your own Senate, and you're talking about warring over in other countries, right? And there's another one. I always be using this. I always used to hear this. It's one of them well-known Benjamite sayings. A chain is only as strong as its weakest link, meaning overall strength, success, or effectiveness of a group, system, or organization is limited by its least capable or most vulnerable component. Yep. Now I remember we used to ride my bike and there was one chain. There was a link in the chain that was always messing, going off. You know what I mean? I took it, and I always, for as long as I had that bike, the chain would keep coming off, and I had to eventually just get rid of it. You know, the chain, and then eventually the bike. You grow out of bikes anyway, but the bike gave me problems because the chain had a weak link. And it caused the whole, you don't tighten one screw, the whole thing falls apart. Even if most parts are strong, one weak point can cause the entire system to fall. And we're going to get to the scriptures. We've got scriptures to back this up as well. Just bringing out some of these sayings which based on truth and true experiences. Right? So let's check out this. Let's check out another one here. check out another clip. Let it play. Because yeah, there's a lot of in-house dissatisfaction and disagreements that they're covering up, and the cracks will show, and the cracks are starting to show.
This is a bombshell resignation letter. It appears to undermine Trump's central case for war, and the president's not happy.
I always thought he was weak on security.
The letter adds weight to the British and European reluctance to get involved, but it is a letter that demands context too, because of who wrote it. First, the key sentence. 8 words: Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation. So who wrote?
Boom! That's a cut, man. In your own house, man. You got defectors, man. That's a cut.
The letter? Well, Joe Kent is, or was, the director of the National Counter-Terrorism Center, a key US government department. He was appointed by President Trump last year. A former soldier, he served in Afghanistan and Iraq and was then a CIA operative. His first wife, also a
high up in the ranks,
soldier, was killed in an ISIS bombing in Syria in 2019. Now, politically, Kent is the personification of Trump's core America First platform. He's mega MAGA. He's against American intervention overseas. He's against the US support for Ukraine. His time in the military and personal tragedy formed his views on forever wars. He's also been tied to white supremacist groups. His appointment as director of the National Counterterrorism Center was controversial among critics of Trump, of course. So that's the context. And those same Trump critics now find themselves aligned with him over the Iran war. So let's get into the key parts of the letter. First, this. He wrote, in June of 2025, Trump understood that the wars in the Middle East were a trap that robbed America of the precious lives of our patriots. Then he claimed Trump was drawn into Iran by Israel. Early in this administration, high-ranking Israeli officials and influential members of the American media deployed a misinformation campaign that wholly undermined your America First platform and sowed pro-war sentiments to encourage a war with Iran. Then this. This echo chamber was used to deceive you into believing that Iran posed an imminent threat to the United States. And he said his first wife was killed in a war manufactured by Israel. She was in fact killed by an ISIS bomb. He clearly holds skeptical views of Israel, to say the very least. But does all this context invalidate his key point that Iran posed no imminent threat? That's the story here. Was there a threat, and how imminent was it?
You would have had a nuclear war in the Middle East and maybe beyond. I think it would have hit Europe.
That was the president this week. The problem is there has been no evidence produced to back up that claim. One final thought to all this, bringing it back to President Trump. Joe Kent, remember, was MAGA to his core with his views. And so I do think this letter should be an alarm bell for the president. The
to say the
people
least,
who put him in the White House are uneasy, to say the least.
Right? He was mega MAGA. Joe
To
Kent.
his core claim. One final thought to all this, bringing it back to President Trump. Joe Kent, remember, was MAGA to his core with his views. And so
He was mega MAGA, right? A former Green Beret. They're supposed to be very highly trained soldiers. Because the movie First Blood with Sylvester Stallone was acting, it was a movie, but he was playing a Green Beret, and he was almost impossible to trap, almost impossible to kill. He took out the whole of the precincts, the police precinct. So if that on paper, this is supposed to be a highly high-ranked soldier, right? But now he's officially a defector, or what they call traitors. So this is what's happening. A person who abandons a country, cause, or political party, right? The word defector, usually to join an opposing or rival group. Right? It implies a often illegitimate switch of intelligence such as a citizen fleeing. All right, there you have it. That's the point, though. Right, implies opposing or rival group, abandoning their country or political party, a defector or traitor. This is what's happening, right? This is what's happening in the Senate. So I read that one. You know, this is a quick hit video. The point done made, right? Matthew 12:25. Yeah. And Yehoshua knew their thoughts and said unto them, every kingdom divided against itself is brought to desolation, and every city or house divided against itself shall not stand. Yep. And it goes into prophecy too. Let's hit this one. Proverbs 29:2 says, when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice, but when the wicked beareth rule, the people mourn. Even in your own, even you got defectors, you got traitors, the house that is divided will not stand. Right? That is why all kingdoms, military armies, you know, as well as you got alphabet people in them as well in your military over there in Babylon. That's why it ain't gonna be successful. That's why they fall, they splinter, they fall to pieces. And this is what I brought out. I think I've been bringing it out quite a lot recently. Daniel chapters 2, because it's on point. And 33 says, his legs of iron is part of iron and part of clay. Yep. Now, here Daniel was describing the image. He was breaking it down to Nebuchadnezzar. And he was going through all the kingdoms. And we got to the legs here. And this is the last legs, pun intended. But you got the ancient Romans, which they was destroyed, right? But then they was revived again from their death stroke, and they're here today, back here today. But how are they here today? His legs of iron is part of iron and part of clay. Yeah, that's so if till that a stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image upon its feet that were of iron and clay, and broke them to pieces. It's easier to break. It's easier to break when something's already half broken in the first place. It's easier to crack. One crack leads to big cracks, and then big cracks lead to the whole statue falling down. So we've got in-house fighting here taking place, right? And this is the bottom, the last legs. Esau, you're on your last legs. Let's hit couple more precepts just to emphasize the point. Here we have Daniel chapter 7, and let's hit 20. Daniel chapter 7 and verse 20. Is it 20 I want? Yep, verse 20 says, and of the 10 horns that were in his head, and of the other which came upon before whom there, right, so the 10 horns are described here are the EU nations, right, otherwise known as the Germanic tribe, right, the EU nations or the European nations, right, the EU, right, or the Germanic tribe, right, which were originally from the German tribe. So reading on, came up, right, so the 10 horns that were on his head. Let me start again. Daniel chapter 7 and 20. And of the 10 horns that were in his head, right, and on the other which came up, and before whom 3 fell, right, so the 3 that came up and 3 fell were the France, Spain, and the English, right, from the so you had France, Leopold or Napoleon, Spain, Isabella, right? These were the heads of those times, or Ferdinand. Then you had the English, right? These are the 3 that fell, right? Even of that horn that had eyes and mouths, right? That horn that had eyes and mouth is America, his fellow America, which is as it explains there, right? Which came out of the other nations, right? Which came out of America, or the England, right? America came out of England, right? Who came and so these European nations, yet they took down on the other European nations, right? So they took down the other European nations. So you had, I'll read it again, Daniel 7 and 10. And of the 10 horns that were in his head, and of the other which came up, and before whom 3 fell, right? Spain, England, and France, that had eyes and mouths that spoke every great thing, right? These were the Americas, which came out of those other nations, or came out of Britain, right? Which was full of blasphemies, it says there, right? That spoke very great things, whose look was more stout than his fellow, right? Who are we talking about there? Americas, right? Which they can't tolerate anymore. He's more stout than his fellow, as we saw in the clip. You know, he's speaking double speak, right? He has no form of repentance, no form of apology, right? And they can't stand him anymore, right? Let me get your choppers around this again.
It's a good thing that he's out.
President Trump slammed former Green Beret Joe Kent minutes after Kent posted his letter of resignation on social media, saying he, quote, cannot in good conscience support the ongoing war in Iran. Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation.
I read his statement. I always thought he was a nice guy, but I always thought he was weak on security, very weak on security.
That's not what Trump said last year when he nominated Kent to run the National Counterterrorism Center. Then he praised Kent as a man who, quote, hunted down terrorists and criminals.
Yeah, you put him there.
This is
You
a
put him
bombshell.
there. He come up again. He said, "This is a bombshell."
It's a good thing that he's out.
President Trump slammed former Green Beret Joe Kent minutes after Kent posted his letter of resignation on social media, saying he, quote, cannot in good conscience support the ongoing war.
Right, there you have it.
This is a
Go back again.
It's a good thing that he's out.
President Trump slammed former Green Beret Joe Kent minutes after Kent posted his letter of resignation on social media, saying he, quote, cannot in good conscience support the ongoing war in Iran.
All
Iran posed no.
There you have it. Cannot in good conscience support the ongoing war in Iran. Iran posed no threat to our nation.
Imminent threat.
There you have it. Get your choppers around that, right? From the horse's mouth, or from your own Senate, people be waking up, speaking out. So yeah, Trump spoke very great things, whose look was more stout than his fellow, right? So you got in-house fragmenting from the inside out. It's all happening. Right, so there you have it, Akim. Right, I opened with it. I'm going to close with it. Matthew in red letters, Matthew chapters 12. The point is done made. 12 and 25 says, and Yehoshua knew their thoughts and said unto them, every kingdom divided against itself is brought to desolation, and every city or house divided against itself shall not stand. As a matter of fact, another one just come to my mind. Let's hit that one as well. I think we went into it, and we're going to have to keep going into it because it's very appropriate. It's Revelation. We want Revelation 17. And we're going to get straight to the point. 17 and verses 7. Let's hit 16. It says, and the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore. Yep, these are all the nations that are saying no, and they're building momentum, right? They don't want him in, using their platforms, right? As a matter of fact, let me read. The 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast shall hate the whore, right? So you got the 10 horns, which are the NATO and the EU, which we mentioned earlier, right? Which are the other nations, right? Which are saying, these shall hate the whore, right? And the whore is America's, right? Which is in purple colors, which is represents royalty or wealth, right? And shall make her desolate and naked, right? We're hearing a lot of speak at the moment, and it's just speak. We shall make her desolate and naked. And how they're going to make her desolate and naked? And shall eat her flesh, yep, and burn her with fire, right? They're going to turn on her. And when it talks about the fire, that's talking about literal fire, which is going to be from the intercontinental ballistic missiles. But right now we have defectors, we have division, right? We're at the end of the kingdom, right? Showing more fragmentation, right, of Daniel chapters 2. And we went into that, the iron and the molten clay, right? They're not united, EU, right? And it's talking more on that point. The EU are turning on them now. The other nations are turning on them now. They're not united, right? They're going to make her naked and eat and burn her with fire. Eat her flesh and burn her with fire. There you have it, Hakim. Enough said. Defectors, left, right, and center. And this is just the beginning. And it ain't going to get better. But we know other prophecies are lined up only to be fulfilled. But this is a beautiful thing when you see a house divided like this, that's supposed to be making and setting the example, right? When the wicked beareth rule, right? When the wicked beareth rule, the people sigh, even in their own senate, even in their own house. And it's only going to fall, as prophecy says. The only one thing for it to do is fall now.
President Trump, after much reflection, I've decided to resign from my position as director of the National Counterterrorism Center. I cannot in good conscience support the ongoing war in Iran. Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation, and it is clear that we started this war due to pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby.
Right. Due to pressure from Israel, what's that? Let me hit that one too. I don't want to butcher it. That's Obadiah. No, that's not. That's Jeremiah. Jeremiah 50. I went into that yesterday. Jeremiah 50 and 45. And this looks like it's AI. But yeah. These are his words. We're gonna hit a couple more clips. So Jeremiah 50 and 45. And we're gonna have to go over them more than once. Right? More prophecy. 45 says, therefore hear ye the counsel of Yahweh, or Yahweh, yeah, thy power. Therefore hear ye the counsel of Yahweh that he hath taken against Babylon, and his purpose that he hath purposed against the land of the Chaldeans. Surely the least of the flock shall draw them out. Surely he shall make their inhabitation desolate with them. Yep. Let's check out another one here to end it off.
The head of U.S. counterterrorism, Joe Kent, according to his social media account, he has decided to step down, saying, quote, I've decided to resign from my position as director of the National Counterterrorism Center effective today. I cannot in good conscience support the ongoing war in Iran. Iran posed no immediate threat to our nation, and it is clear that we started this war due to pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby. He goes on to say that it was an echo chamber that deceived the president into believing that Iran posed.
The least of the flock shall draw them out. And you've got defectors, right, within your own house coming out and telling you their facts, just like all the other nations have done tell you already. But you're stouter than your fellow. You ain't going to hear that. And let the prophecies roll down like water.
An immediate threat to the United States. Should just point out that Joe Kent had himself been appointed to this position by the president. To step down, saying, quote, I've decided to resign from my position.
Enough said. Point made. Until the next one, we out.